Hello, and welcome to Shadow Me Next. This is a podcast where I take you into and behind the scenes of the medical world to provide you with a deeper understanding of the human side of medicine. I'm Ashley, a physician assistant and the creator of Shadow Me Next. It's my goal to introduce you to the incredible members of the healthcare field and to uncover their unique stories, the joys and challenges they face, and what drives them in their careers. It's access you want and stories you need. Whether you're a pre-med student or simply curious about the healthcare field, I invite you to join me as we take a conversational and personal look into the lives and minds of leaders in medicine. In this episode of Shadow Me Next, I interview Gabby, a registered nurse currently working at a corrections facility. Gabby shares her journey from aspiring physical therapist to corrections nurse, prompted by a personal health experience with an impactful nurse. She discusses the unique process of entering nursing school, the different levels of nursing certifications, and her day-to-day responsibilities in a high-stakes, high-stress environment. Gabby emphasizes the challenges and rewards of providing medical care to inmates, highlighting the importance of compassion, safety protocols, and the supportive rapport with her corrections officers. This episode provides a fascinating insight into a lesser-known yet critical field in nursing. I don't want you to miss a single one of these conversations, so make sure that you subscribe to this podcast, which will automatically notify you when new episodes are dropped, and follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Shadow Me Next, where I'll give you sneak previews of our upcoming guests. Hey, Gabby, thank you so much for joining me on Shadow Me Next. I am so excited to hear what you have to say. I think this is going to be a really enlightening conversation for us.
Yes, well, thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here. So I'm so excited.
You are currently an RN at a corrections facility. And I think that is going to be such an interesting conversation about how you arrived at this career and what encouraged you to choose this profession. It's something that I think typical people just don't know a lot about. I think you have a lot of education to provide us today, but we'll start really easy. Gabby, tell me a little bit about your background and what inspired you to pursue a career in nursing.
So I always knew that I wanted to help people. I just didn't know in what capacity, like where my life would take me. And I went to Florida State. I got my bachelor's degree exercise science because I grew up with sports. I was like, oh, maybe physical therapy would be cool, something in that avenue. Well, life took a turn for me. Ended up working in Miami in a different field. And long story short, I ended up getting very sick in 2017. And in the hospital, and this was after a bunch of doctor's visits, things like that, and nobody could figure out what's going on. It was a nurse that said to me, she's like, hey, I think this is exactly what's happening to you. We're looking at your blood work, everything like that, and just try these things out, see what happens. And I'm not kidding you, maybe a month later, I felt so much better because it was really bad. I lost a lot of weight in that process. A lot of stuff happened to me. So I said to myself, what she did for me, I want to do that for other people. And it just so happened that my husband ended up getting a job that moved us to Arizona. And in the same town that we moved in, there is a nursing program. So that's where I was able to apply and I got into the nursing program. And that's where my nursing career began. Mm-hmm.
I love it when people have personal stories about their experience in healthcare and what drew them in. It gives you a really great perspective to be a patient first. And, I hope that nobody has to be a patient, right? It's scary to be a patient, but I think it does allow you to really see things from a different perspective and a perspective that is so important. And of course, this is kind of ironic thinking about the patients that you care for now. It's a whole different ballgame, I think. And I'm excited to dive into that with you. Talking about the journey to getting into nursing school, what does that look like? Some of our listeners might not understand what that process to getting into nursing school is. So tell us a little bit about that.
So the way that I did it was a little, probably not the same way most people would go about it, but I can talk about both ways. So the general way with nursing school is generally, most programs would either offer a 2-year or a 4-year program. And then probably before that would probably require up to about a year of prereqs. For me, specifically, since I got my bachelor's degree already, it was a 4-year bachelor's, but it wasn't in nursing. I already had the prereqs, everything from that bachelor's. So I was able to use that and go directly into nursing school, which was just 2 years because I have my associate's degree. So it really depends on which route you want to go. If you have a bachelor's degree already, you can do a 2-year program. Or if you want to get another bachelor's, because for nursing, it requires you to be specifically in nursing, you can do a 4-year for bachelor's, or you can do what I did, which is a 2 years, an associate. You can work, and then you can go back into school again and do an online program for 9 months and get your bachelor's, which that's the one I usually recommend for anybody starting nursing school, because that way you're getting in, because with nursing, just like any healthcare profession, you have to get your feet wet. You need to be in person, on the job, meeting with patients, doing procedures, whatever it is, you need to do hands-on stuff, because that's going to be so important. Like, obviously school, we know obviously is very important. Education is amazing, but hands-on stuff is what's going to solidify you in this career. But yeah, so for me, that's how I did it. I had my bachelor's degree already, and so I went in for a 2-year program. And I got my RN license, take a boards exam, and you pass, and then that's it. You can start practicing.
Oh, that's really cool. So you can actually work and be making money while you're in nursing school?
Yes. So another option you can do too is after 1 year of nursing school, you can go take your LPN. So in nursing, you have different levels of nursing, right? So usually most people, they start off as a CNA, they're a certified nursing assistant. They're pretty much everywhere. You can be a CNA working for home health, you can work at a hospital, or you can work at nursing homes, things like that. After a year of nursing school, you are now qualified to be an LPN. So you go take a boards exam for LPN, you pass, and then you can work as an LPN, also usually in the same places as well. And then after your second year, then you just get to take your boards again as an RN, and then after that, that's it. So after you are an RN, and you don't have to take any more exams to keep your license. The only thing is with RN, obviously from there, then you can go forward if you want to get your bachelor's, if you want to get your master's, and then eventually if you want to become a nurse practitioner, you can do that. Or you can go another way around. You can become a nurse anesthetist. There's a lot of things you can do with the RN degree. Pretty cool.
That is very cool. I think number one, I think it's interesting and honestly fantastic that you can work while you're climbing to achieve this goal, right? So the debt factor is a little bit less risky than, say, I'm thinking like medical school or even PA school, because PA school, you can't work while you're in school. And that's 2 years where you're spending a lot of money and you're not making any
Oh,
money,
yes.
right? So I think that that's a really fantastic option. Also, it seems pretty flexible, right? There's kind of stops built in along the way. If you want to stop at say an LPN and kind of work as an LPN for a couple of years, maybe there's something that pops up in your life. Maybe you get married, maybe you have a child, maybe, you need to move out to take care of a sick parent, let's say. It seems like it's a job that can grow with you, right? As much as you want it to.
Yes. And honestly, every single scenario you've listed, all the people who I went to nursing school with have all been through some kind of case like that, which is why it's so cool. And I mean, in my case, I was very, very fortunate that I had a husband that supported me through nursing school. So I didn't even have to work.
Amazing.
But as somebody who did not work, that's why I highly, highly recommend it, because when I went into the working world, it was a little more, because I didn't have as much hands-on experience as the people who were CNAs and LPNs and things like that during nursing school. So that's the only thing I regret, is not doing that. But obviously as you work, you'll get your experience, right? But I do recommend anybody who's working, like, if they can, even if it's per diem or if it's a part-time where you're just working once a week or once every other week or whatever, just to have that experience, I highly, highly recommend it. And just like you said, it's great. And a lot of nurses and facilities that take on nurses or LPN, CNAs, they understand the work, home life, and that kind of balance. So they're usually pretty good about working around your schedule with school and things like that too. So that's awesome.
That is awesome. That is actually a perfect lead in to my next question. When you were in nursing school, did you have any mentors that really helped shape either your career choice or provided a certain level of support that perhaps you needed while you were in school?
So I actually had a clinical instructor. She was my first year, second semester clinical instructor, and she was absolutely fantastic. And we actually, so in nursing school, every semester you are placed in a different facility, for example. So, like our first semester was a nursing home. Then after that, it was the hospital setting, but in different places. Like you can go OBGYN, another one would be like the emergency room, ICU, whatever the case may be. And then they put you in this and you float around. But this clinical instructor was absolutely incredible because we unfortunately had to see somebody not necessarily pass away, but they were on their deathbed and everything like that. And she brought us in and really let us into the perspective of death and dying and everything like that. And seeing that in person versus hearing stories was very different. But it was really nice to have somebody like her who's really, really, really experienced nurse. I mean, she's been a nurse for 20 years, and having her really take us in under her wing, it was a great way for us to find peace. Instead of being sad, heartbroken, it was a good way to find peace. And it was a great way for us to see how a nurse can impact the family and how they can help throughout that process and everything like that. And so, and other than that, she was just a great educator in general, and she was very approachable. And to me, that was really, really big for me because sometimes you're scared, and this in any situation, any scenario, school, whatever. Sometimes you're scared to ask questions. You're scared to feel stupid or something like that. But she was definitely I was always very willing to go and talk to her if I had any questions after an exam or something like that. So, yeah.
That's
And then even with
incredible.
that too, my classmates, a lot of us were really like, we bonded over, it's kind of a trauma bonding, right? Anybody, if you work healthcare or anything like that, there's always, you kind of trauma bond with each other. And I think all of us pushed each other to the end. And we've all still good friends today. So that was really cool to have that.
I'm so glad to hear that it is so supportive. And it's so nice to have a mentor in situations like that, situations that you've never been in. There's going to be 1,000 of those in medicine. And I am sure that you will tell us about some in your current job coming up here
Oh,
pretty
yes.
soon. But, 1,000 situations where you've never found yourself before. And watching a medical provider break bad news on TV, completely different. And it is very scary. And you are the leader in the room. And they look to you in those situations. And I think having somebody whose footsteps you can follow, at least initially, and then whose actions you can copy later on it's such a huge testament to medicine. And I think that's where,
Mhm.
like you said, that hands-on training is so important because you can read how to be compassionate in a book. But until you see that playing
Yes.
itself out in real life, you'll never fully grasp all of the emotions that go into it and all of this, really the strength that you have to have as a medical provider to provide support to those patients. And I think especially nursing, it's incredibly personal in nursing. I think occasionally doctors or NPs or PAs can kind of walk in sympathetically and empathetically provide the diagnosis, but they also can kind of escape too. They give the bad news and then they step back out. But nursing, you're in there with them constantly, and you are really
Yes.
providing the most intimate personal care and healthcare that there is. So I'm so glad that you got to experience that with your mentor. That's great.
Oh yes, yeah. We can go into plenty of stories about things that I had to I've had to witness. At least because in the hospital, that was really where I really got to get my feet wet with those kinds of scenarios. It's
So
not.
in nursing school, is it more hands-on learning or is it more book learning or is it a combination of both?
So it is a combination of both. I would say maybe like 70% book and then about 30%, yeah, like about like 30% hands-on. So they really, really, really are pushing you to focus on the boards exam. Yeah.
And the board exam, Gabby, is it the
Yeah.
NCLEX?
The NCLEX, thank you.
Okay.
I took it, and I don't know if we can tell random stories, but It's very scary. It is very stressful. I cried after the fact, and I got pulled over and got a ticket
No, you
after I took
didn't.
my NCLEX. Yes. So that was really fun. The officer pulled over and he's like, you know you're speeding, right? And I'm tears in my eyes. I'm like, sorry, I just took a big exam. He's like, okay, here you go, and still gives me a ticket.
Come on.
But thankfully, funny story. I came home and I found out I passed, and my husband goes to me. He's like, "Well, that's awesome because now your job, your new career can pay for your ticket."
You're going to start
So
off in more debt.
yeah. And for anybody out there that's going to take any board exam, as you know, it's like it's very intimidating. But you go when you know what you know, and don't ever give up because you can retake it if you need to. I have a lot of friends that we had to retake it a couple of times, but they still did it, and they're amazing nurses. So.
I think this is important to remember. I'm so glad you brought up the board exams because we really haven't talked about that very much. But in medicine, any medical provider that you see has passed some type of a board exam, right? And
Mm-hmm.
the exams are important because they are a standardized test that tells the world that we know enough, right? But at the end of the
Yeah.
day, it is a standardized test. And the board exam is not going to tell you how compassionate of a provider you are. It's not going to tell
Yeah.
you how experienced you are when it comes to diagnosing a patient and then explaining that diagnosis or helping a patient understand their condition. It's just a test. And you do have to pass, but it is not going to tell you what kind of provider you're going to be. And I think that's the biggest thing to remember.
Exactly. Yep. Don't stress over the little things. You get everything done, and you can become the best person you are like as you go through your career. But yeah, 100%. A lot of people that I know that aren't the best at school are the best. Some of the best people you want. Those are the ones you want behind you if anything happens to you. Bad car accident, whatever the case, those are the people you want there by your bedside because they're gonna
Absolutely.
protect you. They're gonna get you better. So.
I love that. I think that's so great. Well, let's get to the part where everybody is so excited about, right? Hearing what life as a corrections nurse is all about. Tell us about what your day looks like just from a bird's eye view. Every day is different, of course, but what's your pattern? What's your rhythm? Do you work days? Do you work nights? How many patients do you have? Stuff like that.
So I am a night shift corrections nurse, and my schedule, I work 3 days a week, 4 days off. So anybody in the nursing world, by the way, most places you usually work 3 days, 312. So woohoo, it's really cool. But for me, I work Saturday, Sunday, and Monday evenings. I work from 6 p.m. to 6:30 a.m. in the morning, and what I do is I get to work around 5:30. I will clock in, and what's happening at that point is in corrections in the prison, they're on a scheduled time. So the inmates are usually let out on the yard or anything like that, usually around 6 in the morning, and the yard closes at 7:30 p.m. every single day. Which means when the yard closes, which means they go back to their housing unit and then they can hang out there and then they'll go to sleep eventually. But so for me, because I get there at 5:30, I'm there for the last leg before everything closes. So depending on the day and depending on the nurses who are there, I either will help with the evening med pass, I help with what we call H&R. So that's like the best way to describe it, it's like our appointment. So in the prison, it's run during the day, it's run like a doctor's office. So the inmates will put in anything with symptoms, like my ear is hurting, I'm having a runny nose, I feel feverish, whatever the case. They get put in on the nurse line and they're seen by the nurses. So I don't necessarily see a lot of inmates like a day shift nurse do in that case. And I'll explain what I see at night. But okay, so then let's say the yard closes at 7:30. Usually by that time we get our appointments done. Med pass is usually done by that time, and then that's it. So the inmates go back to their housing units, and then what I do after that is I do checks around the office, and I just make sure so oxygen tanks are good. I do some paperwork, some audits in the prison. Every single thing is counted. right?
Good.
Because we
Yeah,
don't want
good.
somebody running around. You don't need someone running around with a needle or, or any of that kind of stuff, a scalpel, things like that. So my job is I do count all the sharps and all the narcotics every single night that I'm there, twice a night. And I make sure, obviously, that everything in the medical building is checked. The EKG machine is working fine. Our AED is up to date, is good to go. I do all that stuff. Okay. So at that point, when around 8:30 at night, now I am completely by myself as medical staff. Everybody leaves for the day. I am the only medical staff for the entire complex.
How
So
many
to put it
inmates
in
is that, Gabby?
perspective, about 2,000.
Oh my gosh.
So I'll put it in perspective. So we have the prison that I'm at has 4 units. So you have a level 3 unit, which usually means the crimes are usually that's like murder, life sentences, things like that, kidnapping, whatever the case. Then we have a level 2 unit, which is more like they had drugs on them, minor crimes. And then we do have another unit that is a sex offender unit. We do have one that's separate from other ones. And then we also have one that's called the medical detention unit, which is where people are usually placed in there if they like misbehave. So they got into a fight, they were caught with drugs on them, things like that. They get put in there. And it's like, that's like one where it's like a cell by cell. I call it the Silence of the Lambs unit. I don't know if you've ever watched that movie before.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's like it's just like the cell and they're looking at you through there. I have to wear a stab vest when I go into that unit.
What's a stab vest?
Obviously a stab vest is like a plate carrier that officers wear, things like that. It's kind of like that I have to wear when I go in there.
Gosh, Gabby. Okay. High stress, high stakes. This is intense.
It sounds really intense. It's about 2,000 inmates and I'm by myself. So at night, my job is to be there for any emergencies, anything like that happens. I'm the one that has to respond to all the units, do all that stuff. And my also job as well is around 5 a.m. I also do med pass at another unit. So that's about 40. Yeah, that's about 40 guys. I think it'd be a little less now. It's about 30 people that I usually see in the mornings, everything like that, doing blood pressure checks, medicine, insulin. So that is like my day-to-day life there at the prison.
It all sounds high stress. How do you balance? I guess we'll keep it general, and this is kind of a question for both. But how do you balance providing care with all of the security and safety protocols of working in a prison? I mean, that's things that the average nurse will never have to consider anywhere else.
So let me tell you something. Inmates, for the most part, a lot of them are they really do just want help. And they are very, 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 very considerate. I would even honestly say better than a lot of people that I dealt with in the hospital. They're more considerate to you as a medical staff than other people are. So people don't realize that, right? Because you're looking, if you look at an outside perspective, oh, this guy murdered somebody. Oh, he did this, he did that. Okay, fine. He did that in his past. But if he knows that you're there willing to help him, he knows that and he understands that. So, for example, I'll tell you, with me, the way it's been really cool because I've built a rapport with the corrections officers. So, and they understand and they know, when medical is needed to be brought in, let's say an emergency happens and somebody I've had somebody who had overdose. Okay. And it happened recently where somebody had overdosed in their run or where they sleep at with all the beds. And when I walk in, the corrections officers know, hey, medical is walking in and the inmates, they make way for you. And they know because I'm coming in with a stretcher, I'm coming with stuff, and they make way and they don't give me any grief. They make sure I'm good. Like there's nobody that comes and attacks you. They might say something here and there, but usually not that big of a deal. You can block them out. But with the corrections officers, they understand that, and the corrections officers, they make sure they're always with you. You're never ever by yourself with an inmate. Let's say, for example, HIPAA reasons or anything like that. If an inmate has a question for you or needs to speak to you about something, like they will be in the room in an office with you, or they'll bring them into an interrogation room or whatever with the door slightly closed, but an officer is always right there. So if something were to happen, I'm never by myself. It definitely makes a huge difference. I am very fortunate that the prison that I'm at is a really good prison. I love my job. I love the guys and girls that I work with. Everybody has a good rapport, everything like that. But some prisons you might not have that. So that's the thing you have to be careful of. Now we're going into like a life lesson. If you ever feel uncomfortable or you feel like the corrections officer as a nurse, if they're not taking care of you or they're not there for you, you need to leave that job and find another one. Because there are prisons that do that where they might leave people stranded and you never want to be in that situation.
That's so applicable to regular life as well. I mean, if you are in a position where your colleagues and the people that are responsible for your well-being, not necessarily your safety, but perhaps your schedule or the patients that you're seeing, or the way that you're protected from malpractice claims, things like that. If you're not supported in your role, I absolutely agree with you. Address it. If it doesn't change, find a new job because you're worth more than that, you know?
Yep, exactly. Your life, your sanity, everything is worth way more than what they're paying you or whatever the case may be. There's always something better out there for you. You just have to be willing to take the chance to leave. In corrections, because I've talked to people who've worked on the other side of these kinds of things, and they say like this place is the best, like one of the best prisons they've ever worked at. And so I'm very fortunate that was my first one, and that I'll be here for a while. Like I do love it a lot. But yeah,
that's awesome.
That really helps out with that stress environment, everything like that. And as a medical professional there, you get to know these guys a lot. For the most part, when you're doing med pass all the time, and a lot of these guys are on chronic care, right? So they need to be seen for kidney issues, diabetes, things like that, where it's an ongoing thing. You get to know your unit just like you would in a doctor's office. You get to know your patient. And once you start building a rapport with these guys, it makes it easier. And they look out for you too. They really do. If somebody who's new on the yard comes in or something like that and is kind of making a scene, those guys will step in and say, hey, she's here to help you. So you need to calm down. Like the officers don't have to do anything. The inmates will do it. Like they take care of each other. Let them do their job and whatever. And then usually that helps calm down the situation, everything like that too.
That's amazing. I love that. I'm so glad, because I think as medical providers, we chose this job to a certain degree because of the rapport and the respect in the community that I think we have. At least I think that's a very honest reason why, when I reflect on why I chose my career in medicine, it is largely because I feel like I can serve my community as a type of leader. And your community is a prison. And the inmates are showing you as much, if not more, like you said earlier, respect than perhaps you would get if you're working in a hospital or in a clinic from the everyday person. So I'm really glad that you're experiencing that, even in a population where people might think that's not as common. It sounds like it's more common, actually.
Yes, it is.
So you mentioned diabetes, you mentioned high blood pressure as some of the chronic conditions that you treat. Gabby, what are some other emergencies? Overdose, of course, I'm sure that's rampant. Is there been some more emergencies that you've had to run solo as the only medical provider for 2,000 people?
Yes. So for me, the biggest ones, unfortunately, have been overdose, under the influence, whatever you want to call it, everything like that has been pretty big on the yard. Now, actually, for us, a pretty big thing is actually heart problems. That's a very big thing because, unfortunately, a lot of these guys who were in the prison system were all on drugs, had been on drugs, cocaine use, anything like that, can affect your heart really bad, especially if you've been doing it since you were young. And so I have a lot of younger guys who are coming in with chest pain, some of them having real heart attacks.
Wow.
And things like that. And so it's just, for me, what I have to do is I have my EKG there. I get EKG. I'll start a line on them, things like that, and I get them out to the hospital. So my job is stabilize, get their vitals, get what they have to do for them, and then I get the ambulance. I get an ambulance to come in. They take them to wherever hospital they deem is better for that specific case. But yeah, no, so heart issues are really big. Liver, we have a
Sure.
lot of Hep C. Yeah, with Hep C and any kind of liver, fatty liver, anything like that, liver failure, things like that. A lot of these guys, for them specifically, like they never had anybody that cared about them, or really specifically medically. Most of these guys had never been to a doctor before until meeting us for the first time. Most of them had never, had to deal with anything medically before until they got into prison, or they never had the funds to go to a doctor. And since they're in prison, the state funds it, and they can finally get seen for their heart problems or their liver or whatever. So yes, a lot of them, and it can be very intimidating for them. I mean, can you imagine if you're 45, I've never been to a doctor before. Can you imagine that? And now you're first, it's now here at a prison where you're scared out of your mind because something is going on with you and you don't know what it is. And so that's where we step in and we take compassion. We sit with them. We try to explain to them things that are going on and get them to the right people. We schedule them with providers, GI doctors, with cardiologists, with whoever they need to go to. But that's dentist. A big thing too is dentistry.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people have never been to a dentist before. It's been very rare that you had a guy that said, "Hey, this is annoying. I don't want to do." No, a lot of them always come back and they thank us for what we've done.
Amazing.
Which is crazy. Yeah, that to me, because that coming from the hospital there, it was such a big turnaround. I was like, wow, I think this is like what? Like I'm being thanked for my job, but this is amazing. Okay.
Oh my
I
goodness.
appreciate it.
Gabby, that's so funny because my next question I was going to ask you is what misconceptions you think people have about working in corrections nursing. And that seems like it's a big one, right?
Yeah. And you know what? Here's the thing. Don't put your guard down, right? When I'm going into the medical detention unit. So when I walk in there, I know I'll hear some words, I'll hear something being thrown around, whatever. But when you start actually talking to them and answering their question, they calm down, right? Because they're just stressed out, they're riled up, they're anxious, things like that. But it's a big pointer I make to everybody. Never disclose any information to them about your personal life. Never, ever tell them anything about like what's going on with you or anything like that, because they will use that information. Because a lot of guys will do that. But I will tell you that with these guys, for the most part, you can't look at them as the crimes that they committed. If you're going to work in healthcare, and you know this, even if working, like if you're going to be an emergency room nurse, if there's a shooting and it's the guy doing the shooting who comes to you, you better be ready you have to take care of that guy.
Yep.
Right? So like you have to take away that thought process out of your head. Because a lot of these guys have done some really, really, really bad crimes. But to me, they're just a person when they come to me. It's just a person. It's a patient. I'll do everything in my power to make sure they're good, they're taken care of, and then I send them on their way. But you have to be very careful. It's that line. They can be very cool, they respect you, but also remember that they can also be very manipulative depending on the situation. So you have keep your distance, but do your job respectfully.
I think that's perfect, Gabby. And I think that in a way, even if we don't work in corrections, in a way, we still have to embody that mindset as healthcare providers.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes it's quite obvious, especially with the patients that you are treating, you do have to maintain a certain level of professional distance is what I like to call it, right? You can show them compassion and you can show them true support and even, dare I say, love and kindness every single day, but you don't have to open yourself up all the way. Especially right now, I think some people are expecting that from us as healthcare providers and expecting us to pour every single thing into their care. And I am going to give my A+ best effort. But at the end of the day, I do have to protect my mental health and my physical health. And that's because we have a job to do. And our job does not end when we walk out of that patient room or that patient cell or that hospital bedside. Our job continues and we have a duty to serve all of these patients. In your case, 2,000. In my case, maybe
Yeah.
24 a day. But we ultimately we have to protect ourselves. And I'm so glad to hear you say that, because I think we are doing a disservice to future healthcare providers if we don't at least address that and say, you are important too. And it's okay to say things like that. That's not unrealistic.
Exactly. Yeah, you have to take care of yourself. How can you take care of anybody else if you're not taking care of yourself, right? And
Right.
yeah, and then in the prison system, you really have to be on your P's and Q's, and don't bring anything there, because those guys will talk back to you. They can do it. They know how to banter. They know how to, they're witty, right? That's another misconception. A lot of people might think, oh, they might be stupid if they no, like, these guys are incredibly intelligent.
Mm-hmm.
Incredibly intelligent. Just make sure you're level headed, that you're good to go, and you take care of yourself mentally, and you go in, you can take care of them, because they need so much caring, because they never had that in their lives. Most
Absolutely. Well, I have one more question after this, but before we get to that, we do have this quality question segment that I love to add in. And it's a question that somebody has asked you in an interview that has just stuck with you. Either it was really hard or it was totally out of left field, but it's stuck with you for a certain reason. Do you have a question like that you can share?
for me, a lot of the interviews that I had, it's all been pretty much the same. I think for me, the one that really got me was when I was applying to work for the PCU. And they asked me, what was the hardest challenge you ever faced? And are you willing to face something even more difficult than that?
I would love to see people's faces when you ask them that, right? Because I think a lot of us are expecting, what was the most challenging thing you faced in your life? Or tell me about a time that was really, really hard or that didn't turn out the way you expected. But then to kind of turn it on its head and say, are you prepared to face that and more in this career?
Yes. To me, it felt like I was about to go. I don't know if anyone knows the Lord of the Rings reference, but I felt like I was going to go to Mordor. Like, I was
Yes,
like, what is this? What am I getting into? I'm about
right.
to go on a journey here, an adventure.
Thank you for sharing that one. That's a fantastic question. Okay, so to wrap things up, Gabby, this has been I could talk to you for 15 hours. You know that, but you got a night shift to go to. But what advice would you give to new nurses who are just starting out in their careers?
What I recommend for all new nurses, especially ones that are like me that didn't really get a lot of hands-on stuff, work in a department that's very generalized, where you're putting IVs in, you're drawing blood, you're seeing different kinds of disease processes, because it's going to get you well-rounded, a little more rounded for when you want to specialize. So for me personally, it helped me out a lot, because I have to start IVs a lot. I have to do EKGs. I'm seeing different disease processes, things like that. But I was able to bring in my knowledge to the corrections side of it. So that's 100% what I would recommend. You need to see everything.
That's fantastic advice. Gabby, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. I feel like I have learned so much, and even more, I feel like I have so much to learn about corrections medicine and serving a population that perhaps is overlooked. And I think that if we could find even that one person who, like you mentioned, perhaps has never gone to a physician or an NP or a PA or had the pleasure of being cared for by a nurse before, if we can find that one person in our practice and pour into them and give them the care that they need, I think, God, how much better would this world be? I think it would be amazing.
Yes, I 100% agree with that. And we need corrections nurses out there. Honestly, it's a very rewarding career for me, 100%. And
I'm so glad to hear that.
I love it. And I will be sticking with corrections for as long as I can. So
Amazing. Well, Gabby, thank you so much for joining us today on Shadow Me Next. It's been a pleasure.
no, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. It was great talking to you. It was great hearing from you. And hopefully we'll talk soon.
Thank you so very much for listening to this episode of Shadow Me Next. If you liked this episode, or if you think it could be useful for a friend, please subscribe and invite them to join us next Monday. As always, if you have any questions, let me know on Facebook or Instagram. Access you want, stories you need. You're always invited to Shadow Me Next.